welcome to this, the final public video in my series on the basics of the music business. And this time, we're going to dive into the wild and wonderful world of music licensing. Now, this is normally the domain of music publishers and labels and media production companies, but it is still a viable, sometimes very viable, source of income for independent artists and composers. But it's not for the faint-hearted. However, to begin with, let's take a look at who owns what. Remember, content is king. Ownership, and therefore control, of the various rights embodied in a musical work is key to success in the music business. There are two specific forms of rights that operate here, the master right and the publishing rights. Together, they form the basis of most music business trading, the master and publishing deal. As we've seen in previous lessons, publishing is centered around the commercial exploitation of a moral right. The owner of a moral right agrees a contract with a publisher for this commercial exploitation, and in order for a work to be commercially exploited, it has to be fixed in some form of recorded media. It goes something like this. The composer writes the song, makes a recording of the song, and that recording is eventually the master. The combination of the two creates the master and publishing right. So, very simply, whoever pays for the recording of a musical work, and that could be you, owns the right to that specific recording. Master right itself does not imply ownership of any copyright. Because a master embodies a copyright work, permission must be obtained from the copyright owner for any commercial use of the master right. Heads up, if you've recorded your own work, you own the master right. This gives you the right to assign your own ISRC. This also gives you the right to negotiate with any third party, a label for example, who wishes to release your own master. And any label that wishes to release a master that you've recorded and paid for, without offering you some kind of deal or compensation for that right, is not really playing the game. Master right or recording right owners may assign their own ISRC showing their country, company code, release year and catalogue number. They may duplicate and release for sale. They may broadcast, make deals for duplication and release for sale in other territories, allow usage on other projects, compilation albums for example, and negotiate usage in other media, TV commercials for example. None of the above can be completed without permission from the copyright owner, and that, presumably, is also you. Valuing the master. There is no simple calculation. However, the overall cost of making the master will generally be considered to be the base value. Airplay and sales can be an indication that there is a greater value in a specific master, as it is clear that there is a demand. Masters that are part of a more successful project, a film score for example, will generally be considered to have a greater value, as the promotional value of the overall project must also be taken into consideration. The more individual territory master licenses there are, the greater the value. Clearly, other companies in other territories have already agreed the potential of the work. And sales and download data will also increase the value of a master, especially when it comes to negotiating deals in other territories. The value of a master becomes important when a rights owner, either yourself as an independent artist, composer or a label, agrees a deal with another label in a different territory. It also becomes important when a rights owner submits music to a digital portal. Although not generally known as master and publishing, this is still in effect what is happening. Spotify, for example, base their payments on master and publishing. It also becomes relevant when a rights owner agrees a deal with another media company for the use of the work in a larger project, a film score or soundtrack for example, a computer game or a TV commercial. This is known as a synchronisation deal. More on that shortly. And finally, it becomes really important when a rights owner is approached by a third party, often a rights clearinghouse, for the use of a work in a different project. This is common practice and applies to both a complete work or a part of a work, as would be the case with electronic music when samples need to be cleared for use. There are so many different ways of exploiting the value of a master. For example here, these would be deals for local releases in other territories, or a sample use request, or a remix request, or game soundtrack, film soundtrack, TV commercial. These last three, of course, would be subject to potential sync fees. Don't forget, master and publishing deals are track-based. Master and publishing deals for albums would mean individual deals for each track on the album. Of course, you can try and do all this yourself, negotiating the deals and tracking the payments, but maybe now you can see why publishers take that 50%. Okay, so you're your own master owner and you want to have control of everything yourself? What the hell do you do with it? Well, a good place to start is MEDEM. MEDEM has changed much over the years, and of course COVID-19 had a major impact, so the event was closed down in 2022 after 55 years. It was revived again in January 2023 and looks set to become once more the go-to event in 2024. So, if you are serious about the commercial possibilities for your music, both in the international commercial music world and the world of licensed music for other media productions, MEDEM in Cannes is the place to be. Links at the end of this lesson. Synchronisation. Synchronisation fees. One-off payments for master use. When it comes to licensing music for broadcast, things actually get a little simpler. The standard master and publishing deal does not apply here, as there are already publishing standards in place for broadcast, performing royalties, and these would be notified to the Copyright Society by a cue sheet submitted by the content producer. So all we need to sort out now would be the master use payment. Enter the synchronisation fee. What are sync fees? Well, it's a one-off payment made to the master owner for the right to synchronise a musical work within a wider project or production, usually film or video based. Sync fee rates vary according to usage and the society representing them. In most cases, sync fees are negotiable, but there are a few societies around the world who do lay down specific guidelines for payments. These are often not enforceable under any law. For more information on sync in the UK, go to the BPI website, link in the links page. In Holland, for example, where there is a huge amount of music synchronisation with broadcast, Stichting Sync are the people to turn to, although, again, their fee structure, part of which is shown on the next slide, is still really only a guideline, and many companies prefer to negotiate, with some companies, of course, trying to avoid the whole idea of making any sort of payment. As I've mentioned, sync fees vary from territory to territory. This is an example from Holland. Sync fees are payable per 30-second use, per 15-second use in some territories, and are the source of much disagreement with production companies. YouTube agreements via RightsFlow, Rumblefish or directly with a PRO would need massive streaming figures to come anywhere near a sync fee. When we enter the world of advertising, we find the true home of sync fees. Large corporations pay considerable sums of money for the right to use a song, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a hit, if they feel that it will enhance the appeal of their advertisement to a specific target market group. Sync fees are often 50-50 splits between the master owner and the composer, although if a publisher is involved in arranging the deal, and they usually are, then expect to pay a percentage to him as well. However, payments in excess of $100,000 are common in major television campaigns and can often exceed 5 times that. The US in particular are masters of the sync fee and the negotiations that take place around them. And don't forget, a sync fee is a one-off payment for the right to use the music in the project. Once the project is broadcast, then the normal performing royalties come into play. Sampling. This is a contentious issue, so let's dispel a few myths. If less than 3 seconds of another work is sampled, it's not an infringement. Wrong. If the copyright owner can prove substantial use, there can be no time limit, and any recognisable fragment, no matter how small, may be considered to be an infringement. If less than 4 notes of another work is sampled, it is not an infringement. Wrong again. If even 1 note is sampled, it is an infringement of master right and sometimes also of copyright. If a court case is brought, a judge can call on expert witnesses, musicologists, to assist with the ruling. It is very rare for a judge to rule against a copyright owner. The fair use principle. If a sample does not damage or harm the reputation of the original owner, it can be considered fair use. This is very wrong indeed. Fair use only applies to very specific categories. And those categories are reporting, review, education, research, search engines, and parody. There is no statutory determination of fair use, and each case must be judged on its own merits. The rule here is very simple: get a license or get sued. If you want to use a sample, contact both the master owner, usually the record label, and the copyright owner, usually the publisher, and get written permission from both of them. Licenses vary in price considerably, from around $250 for less than 1 second to $10,000 for anything that could be considered to be substantial. This can be as little as 5 seconds. Most fees fall within the $1,000 to $2,000 range, but may also include a share of the mechanical royalties as well, although some labels will accept a mechanical-only deal. A license on its own is not sufficient. You must also credit the original copyright owner on any release that contains the sample as well, and this would mean therefore also sharing the publishing royalty income. So, artists and producers, read your contracts. A label contract will almost always have an indemnification clause. If you violate master or copyright in your work, you will be responsible, not the label or the publisher. Penalties for infringement can be severe and can, almost always do in fact, include losing 100% of your royalties and having to repay any royalties earned. Vanilla Ice versus David Bowie and Queen with Ice Ice Baby, for example. A $100,000 fine plus removal of all copies for sale from stores for willful infringement, i.e. knowing that the samples used belong to another and not giving credit and or not obtaining permission. Dr. Dre, Truth Hurts versus Bappi Lahiri, Addictive. $5.3 million, yes, plus 50% of all future royalties awarded to the estate of Marvin Gaye in the still controversial Blurred Lines case against Pharrell Williams, Robin Thicke and T.I. And although the recent case with Ed Sheeran, also with the estate of Marvin Gaye, did eventually go in Mr. Sheeran's favour, all I can say is that you have been warned. And on that somewhat depressing note, here are some useful links. Okay, so that does all look a bit complex, and it's true that this is not an easy area to break into. But there are websites out there that can help you make a start, especially in the world of sync licensing. Thanks for listening over the course of the last series, and if you head over to our Patreon channel, link in the description, you will find exclusive video on how to get your career moving by doing it yourself. In the meantime, stay tuned for more videos on music and audio coming up in the near future. Thanks for your support.